Welcome back, I am Captain Xavier, and that is entirely too much firepower for one person. And I don't care. This is fabulous. I started designing this after I finished Tier, and was kind of thinking, well, what am I going to do next? And the idea of dual arm-mounted Zeuses popped into my head, and you're like, yeah, that's going to have to happen eventually. Admittedly, the title is a little bit clickbaity, because it obviously doesn't actually shoot fire, but I came up with the idea partly because of the dual flamethrower Hydra guys in Captain America. They had arm-mounted flamethrowers in huge tanks, and I thought, that would be awesome. So thus the flame motif. And given the rate of fire that this thing has, it might as well be, you know, flamethrower. It's just an endless stream of munitions. And I do plan to eventually run red, orange, and yellow rival rounds in it to make it look even more like fire, because it's funny, and I like it. But it is actually fairly simple, especially compared to something like Tier. This is actually a much, much simpler build. Tier was a much more complicated integration, whereas this was less of an integration and more of a minimization. As stated, it's a pair of modified Zeuses. They have been rewired for 3S LiPo, which is housed in its original battery housing. Here, I do need to come up with some kind of a cap still, but the battery just goes in there, takes a 3S LiPo. The flywheels and cage and wheels are all stock. The handle, of course, has been cut down as well as part of the stock. And I like the idea of having something under-mounted, arm-mounted, so that your hands were free. And they kind of are with this loadout. It's awkward, but you can still technically use your hands if you needed to pick up MacGuffins or open doors or something like that. You can technically operate a blaster or a sword in your hand, but it doesn't work particularly well, and you can't operate these while you have something else in your hand. So let's talk about the actual build itself. They are Zeuses, as you can see, minimized Zeuses. They've had their whole handle section and most of a part of their stock removed. They're wired for 3S. The LiPo is in the original battery housing. I decided to put it in there rather than the backpack because it simplified the wiring immeasurably. And there wasn't any good place to put it on the backpack, as you'll see how that is a very minimalist design, and I really like that about this build. Is the actual functional parts are minimalist. I've then added stuff to it because it's what I do. The wiring is basically just a Hyperfire Chaos Nemesis Prometheus style. Flywheels and then a pusher motor. There is motor braking on the pusher motor, not on the flywheels, and the trigger switches for both of those are in this hand-mounted trigger group. So this simply slides onto your hand and has elastic on the back, so it holds in place. You don't have to worry about it falling off. And you squeeze to rev, and then you push the top button to fire. And the pusher doesn't do anything unless it's revved. It's got an electric lock in there, which is fantastic. The backpack, the agitator, and the blower in the backpack are simply linked to the the flywheels. So when you rev, the backpack and the blower go at the same time that the flywheels go, so that's all identical wiring. They just are wired directly to the negative and positive on the flywheels, and they go when the whole system goes. Very, very simple when you get right down to it. They are then attached to these bracers using some 3D printed rail blanks designed by Cameron L. Connor on Thingiverse. They work on any size Nerf rail, and then they're just flat on the other side. So I printed them at 100% infill and was then able to drill and screw into them directly through the bracers. I then added my own heavier nylon strapping because the original elastic and Velcro stuff was never going to hold this weight. Like I said, you can use something in these hands if you really want to. Do I have? Oh, look. So even with this in your hand, you could still hold and operate a blaster, though it's kind of by your fingertips. You can't get a really good grip on it. But you could. You could also hold a melee weapon, though you'd probably be revving the whole time if you were holding a melee weapon. But you can. And originally I wanted to try to design it so that you could hold something in those hands and still fire the proton packs. But that would have required a lot more fiddly wiring and the wire directly into the glove with like buttons on the fingertips, and having rev and fire it proved to not be worth the effort. I figured it would result in a less reliable system, whereas these are incredibly reliable because they're just solid switches. The rate of fire is ridiculous, as you saw in the opening firing sequence, and it only has the one rate of fire. Tier has PWMs that allow you to adjust both the rate of fire and the FPS of the RPM of the flywheel motors. This has neither of that, again, for reliability. Tier is awesome and has so much more features than these things do, but each feature you add reduces the reliability a little bit, because it's one more thing to fail. And as a result, I believe these have a considerably, well, maybe not considerably, but they have a higher rate of fire than Tier's current max rate. And I may change that by putting in a higher RPM pusher motor in Tier, since it can be turned down. There's no reason to not go with a much higher one. And as you notice, this one kind of fires in bursts. Here's a little clip of me trying to fire as little as possible. So it's kind of minimum 2-3 round burst, which is perfectly fine for something that's going to have the amount of ammo that this thing is going to eventually have. So that's pretty much how these work. The wiring on the inside, I think I got some of it filmed. Hopefully I will be able to splice it in now. I have no idea where this will be in the video. I'm not sure how this is going to get edited together, but this is going to be the internal wiring, which is actually very simple, especially when compared to Ire or Tier. Ire is actually the more complicated, but Tier is also an extremely complicated wiring setup. What with having multiple PWMs and various kill switches and the compressor tank that's in there, it's a much more complicated setup. This one is essentially just a Hyperfire, or a Nemesis, or a Prometheus, or a Chaos, any of the ones that have flywheels and one of the conveyor belts. This is essentially my conveyor belt, except instead of a belt, it's just half of a flywheel. But it's a fairly simple wiring. Negative will come in from the battery. It will go to the negative leads on the motors, as well as up to the trigger group. Positive will come in from the battery and go up to the trigger group, and then come back down from the rev trigger to the positive on these two, as well as going out to the agitator and blower assembly. Negative will go there, of course, as well. And then both the negative and the positive, the negative and positive that went up to the trigger assembly, there will be, for the fire trigger, that will have negative and positive going into it on COM, normally open and normally closed, and then COM will come down with the variable negative or positive and go to the positive on the pusher to allow for motor braking. So it does have motor braking to prevent that one last round from going into the flywheels after they've been shut off. There will be an electric lock in the trigger assembly, so the pusher motor doesn't work unless the rev trigger is pulled, and that's all there is to it. So if I connect these two, the pusher motor should spin, and it spins in the right direction even. Fabulous. If I connect these two, the flywheel should go. And they're even going the right direction. Let's take a look at the tanks. So there's the full dual tank setup, which is not, strictly speaking, necessary. Yes, they are cheeseball tanks. That was the only thing I could find that was exactly the size I wanted, and that had threaded lids, and they were cheap. I got them at Target for $5 a tub. And right now, these upper ones are literally just still full of cheeseballs. I think they're actually still sealed. I don't think they've even been opened. This one might have been opened. I think there was some cheeseballing. But eventually, I am going to cut the bottoms out of both of these and glue them together to create one enormous tank, and each one of these will have at least, if not more, capacity than Tier, which means this thing will have literally twice the firepower of my minigun, which is ridiculous and fantastic. For now, the lower ones are single because I wanted, again, reliability. The connection between the two tanks is probably going to be a weak spot that if I don't figure out how to really, really secure it, could in the future be a problem where the seal breaks and you start losing all your air pressure and stuff like that. Which is kind of the trade-off with something this powerful, is there should potentially be a weak spot, I feel. But it is a modular system, because it's me. Of course it's a modular system. You can simply unbuckle all of this, and these come out. And then if you unbuckle the blaster from its retention strap, this is a self-contained unit. And we'll get to some issues with that a little bit later. So as you can see, it's simply a hiking backpack that was given to me by a friend. He didn't need it anymore, and the backpack that was on it was old and sun-worn and rotting. And you can still see some of the damage on here. But I simply took some aluminum bar stock, bent it to fit the tanks, screwed it into the original frame, and then riveted on the nylon straps. And that is all there is to it. It's actually a very, very simple system. These bars down here kind of support the base, and it keeps it from sliding down. And it works perfectly. The nice thing about a hiking backpack, above a regular backpack, is it has the waist belt, which puts a lot of the weight, takes it off of your shoulders and puts it on your legs, which is a much, much better way to deal with extreme weights. Tears does a similar thing because it is designed to clip directly to my plate carrier, which completely distributes the weight over my whole torso if the plate carrier is on correctly. But I really should probably add an actual dedicated waist belt on that to even better get the weight off of my shoulders, because Tears one is much heavier because it's got, you know, a metal frame backpack and the battery is in the backpack and all of that, whereas this one doesn't. So this is ridiculously light. It's plastic and aluminum. So very little added weight from the backpack itself, and the design of the backpack takes the weight of all the ammunition. You know, they are foam balls, but they are foam balls coated in rubber, and several thousand of them will add up, and when you're running around with that all day, that adds up. So the less weight added, the better. Now let's take a look at the individual units. So this is in of itself a fully contained unit. It's fully functional as it is, revs, fires, and that's quite lovely. You could easily toss this into a separate backpack. You might want to add a snorkel of some kind, or what I eventually will probably do is just make a strap frame that just buckles to this, and then that has arm straps and shoulder straps, and then you could take both of them off and hand them off to two individuals, both now having a perfectly functioning Proton pack, which is fantastic. The whole backpack system, I love how self-contained and svelte this came out. You've got the agitator as designed by Out of Darts, and then this is a air mattress pump. Just a 12-volt car, plugs into your car style pump. I've used some ABS pipe to connect them motor end to motor end, and then just wired them together, and then the wire just comes out the side and goes up to the flywheels on the blaster. So when the flywheels are going, so is the blower and the agitator. I modeled them opposite of each other, so they're perfectly mirrored. This hose is just a washing machine hose. You can get it at Home Depot. It came with this frame section here that's connecting the two, connecting the blower to the agitator, and makes that connection solid and beautiful. And yeah, it's really a very simple system ultimately. It could be made simpler, and I do have designs for a simpler concept, going back to an earlier Out of Darts concept that will allow for a really small form factor blaster. A number of people have asked why I went with such a large form factor. Why did I go with Zeus's instead of dual Hurricanes like Out of Darts ran at Ragnar Oktoberfest? He had dual Hurricanes. We didn't have them arm mounted, but yeah, that would have brought this size down to about that big, and it would have been much more compact, which is exactly why I didn't. I am not a svelte individual like Out of Darts. I can't run on a good day. I've got 2 bad knees and herniated discs in my back. I don't run. I plod. And so I wanted a super heavy looking, ridiculous, over-the-top loadout. Thus, the huge backpack with the 2 huge tanks and the 2 underarmed mounted Zeuses. That is what I was going for. The svelter design that I have in mind would be something that would be much more Out of Darts' style. He is a svelte individual and is more of the sprinter and the runner, and so I've got an idea for a much lighter version of this that I'm hoping I can get him to collaborate with me on. I've got ideas for some more modular versions. This one is not as modular as it could be. The hose and wire are permanently attached on this end, and while the hose can come off on the backpack end, and sometimes does when you don't want it to, the cable does not. And I am tempted to cut it and splice in an XD60 connector here, or one of the automotive connectors that actually have a locking nub. And then I definitely need to get a hose clamp to put on here to keep these from wandering off as much as they do. You would then be able to take the blaster off of the tank, which would make moving it and transporting it much, much easier. One last feature that was, I got the idea from a comment from Dale Linton in my comments. He asked about, for a Q&A, he asked about a full foam blaster that had blades on it, and I said that it wouldn't be very practical, really, unless they were just floppy pool noodle. And then I got to thinking about this, and I realized that I could take just a section of pool noodle, no core whatsoever, add some self-adhesive Velcro to it, and because I had left the original Velcro from the original straps, I can now just attach these directly to the Velcro on the bracers, and now I've got lightsaber bayonets. Now they are completely floppy, but the Velcro is strong enough that no amount of force that are going to hit these are ever going to break them loose, which makes them absolutely perfect. Now at this length, it's a little dodgy to be like swinging them, because there's a good chance you're going to clock somebody with the underarmed Zeus, though it is behind your actual hand, so it's less likely, but that's still a really short blade to be engaging in melee when you're loaded onto something like this. I may make longer ones, like almost full-length pool noodles, which would just be completely absurd, but it'd be a lot safer. So that was just a fun little thing, and it's one of the reasons I read all of the comments on my channel, because sometimes I get ideas like this that are just too good to not do. So thank you, Dale. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying the Proton pack setup. Like I said, I plan to build a modular one that has a standardized jack and hose connection so that I can make numerous different blasters that all connect to the same backpack. Just because that'd be fun. And I have definitely a couple of blasters that I know I'm going to turn into Proton pack blasters. So let me know what you guys think of this. What kind of blasters you think would work out well. Let me know if you have some idea of what I can do for next year, or the end of this year, because Tier was the end of 2017. This was the end of 2018. How do I one-up this? I don't want to just add a third Proton pack. That's not interesting enough. I want to go deviate from the whole Proton pack concept, possibly. So let me know what you guys think would be a really good end-of-year build, and then I can start looking for parts and designing it now. Let's show some more firing footage. Let me know what you guys think of this, and thank you guys for watching. The Garden Weasel Rival Round Recovery System. Get yourself one.